Well, if the true mark of success is in the results, then we've got somebody you're going to want to talk to, and that's Steve Bredschneider with True Results Consulting. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Joe. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm really blessed to be of service today.
Well, thank you very much for coming in. I mean, I have to be honest. I've heard of life coaches or jobs or perspectives along that line, but I've never really sat and chatted with anybody until you and I met to discuss what it is you do. And I have to admit, I'm more than just a bit intrigued.
Awesome. That's good.
Well, and Brantford, at a time when we're experiencing such tremendous growth, it really speaks to the number of opportunities that are available to the people in Brantford.
Absolutely. There's all kinds of opportunities available to people. And what I think is happening in Brantford is that people are really not aware of the fact that they can achieve anything that they set their minds to. It stems from a problem that people really don't know who they are and what they're capable of. We are infinite beings. We can achieve anything that we want. I mean, if we can put people on the moon, well, we can help the economy in Brantford grow. Yeah. Or we can change our lives to have the kind of lifestyle and the kind of wealth that we want. So your results are exactly a reflection of what you believe.
Well, one of the things that comes to mind is I remember hearing somebody refer to his upbringing, and he was caught in a kind of a cycle of listening to old tapes, things that he was constantly told over the years that he would never amount to anything. He would never be able to accomplish what his dreams were. He would never be able to do this. So when he got himself out of that cycle, he said, "I'm no longer listening to those old tapes." So it sounds quite similar.
Exactly that. So these old tapes that your friend was talking about is ideas that somebody else handed him. So when he was growing up, especially in the very vulnerable years of right from when you hit the ground running to about 8 or 9 years old.
I'm quite familiar with those years as a kindergarten teacher. So,
right? So you know how malleable these young children's minds are. Yeah. So can you imagine a sibling or a parent, trying to do good, but saying something like you're not doing well enough, or you're not smart enough, you're not all of these negative ideas. Well, with a child disappointing a parent, that is a real emotional impact. Yep. So these things get ingrained in the subconscious mind in a thing called the paradigm. And the paradigm is just all of these ideas that are handed to us that cause us to have limited thinking.
Well, and you're speaking, or you're preaching to the confirmed, because I have to tell you, in a kindergarten classroom, we constantly use positive feedback, and I will hear children over and over again say, "Mr. Persia, I can't do that." And it's like, well, no, you may not be able to do it right now, but in time we'll be able to do this, and I can show you how we can do this together. And it might be something as simple as printing their name, which to a 3 or a 4-year-old who is holding a pencil or a crayon for the first time is a task that is completely foreign to them, to something that by the end of the year they've mastered quite readily. So it's again getting them over that initial hump.
Yes, the disappointment, the discouragement of failure, right? Now, here's the thing about a young child is that they don't see failure as something that's permanent. Failure is just a learning process, right? So they have a little bit of disappointment. So they say to you, "Oh, Mr. Persia, I'm having this difficulty." And the positive encouragement you give them is perfect, exactly what people need. Yeah. So think about yourself. You want to achieve something that's greater than what you are right now. You want to have a wealthier life. You want to have a healthier life. You want to have more time freedom. These things are all capable of. We just don't know how to get there. And quite frankly, the how doesn't matter. How to get there doesn't matter. It's the doing to achieve that we learn how. It's just like your kids learning how to spell their names, right? They've got to constantly keep doing it. And as they fail, they try a little harder, or they learn something new. They learn a different, you show them a little bit of a different stroke that they could use, or something, technique that they can use. And next thing you know, they're accelerating. Right. And before you know it, they're writing essays.
Well, and you had talked about the fact that failure isn't permanent. I mean, one of the great child theorists of all time was Jean Piaget, who believed that children developmentally get to a stage where object permanence doesn't exist. If something is out of sight, it's out of mind. And at this age in kindergarten, if they don't see it, it doesn't exist. So when they see success as a possibility, it becomes very realistic to them.
That's right. That's right. And again, like, this is why kids are so fearless, right?
Yep.
They'll walk to the edge of a railing or I don't know, some kind of an elevated height, and fearlessly step towards it.
And the adults in the room are gasping.
Yeah, exactly, right? So it's until they experience the result of their actions that they grow through it, and
Yeah.
it's just like us. It's the same sort of thing. Like when you got behind the wheel of the car. This is my favorite analogy. You get behind the wheel of the car for the first time. Your palms are sweating. You're nervous as heck. You've got the instructor to keep you safe. You've spent hours after hours in classroom learning the theory behind it, understanding the controls. But the first time you hit the accelerator, you're almost pulling a wheelie, or
Yeah.
you're you know.
Or the first time you hit the brakes, you're almost kissing the dashboard.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So until you do this in a constant spaced repetition, that's when you become proficient. You get to a point where you don't even have to think about driving anymore. You arrive at your destination, you kind of go like, did I make it? Did I hit the stop signs? Did I hit the traffic lights right? Well, how did I get here? And
So there's an automaticity that comes to it.
exactly. So the subconscious mind gives us perfect automatic, right?
Okay.
So we get into a routine in a day, and that routine is something that's programmed in our subconscious mind. So along with everything that we do, we also have limiting beliefs that stop us from doing more.
Okay. So what you want to say to people is, like, how?
It is that when you're taking a chance, your limiting beliefs are going to hold you back, right? So as an example, you're trying to start a business.
But what about somebody who's dealing with issues that really those limiting beliefs become almost crippling to the point where they.
where they're paralyzed.
Yep.
Yep. And that's called anxiety.
Yep.
Right. It's
And we're seeing it more and more, even in children in school.
Sure. So one of the big things that I'm finding out about is that money is a very major concern. Money is really controlling us. We look at the size of our bank account and we think, oh God, there's going to be more month at the end of the money.
Yeah.
How am I going to pay bills? And we get into this negative thought cycle.
About trying to make enough money so that,
So that you can pay the bills, et cetera, right? So I consider that to be the self-perpetuating, self-generating doom cycle.
Okay.
When we constantly look at our current results, or we're thinking about things that happened in the past. Now, here's the wonderful thing about this. Anything that's in the past is perfectly lodged in our subconscious mind and our memory. And if we stop consciously thinking about the path that we're on, about where we want to go, we start getting those reruns.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
The subconscious mind goes, here, remember this? You got a bill to pay, buddy. Right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, anxiety overwhelms you. And next thing you know, your anxiety is taking control of your thinking. So here's the way it really works. Your thoughts control your emotions control your actions.
I'm going to write that down.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So thoughts control your emotions control your actions.
Exactly.
Okay.
And your actions that you produce are in direct parallel to what you're feeling at the time. So if you're in an anxious state, those actions that you're putting out are going to get a return from your environment that will give you more things to be anxious about.
Okay.
Okay, so if you're worried about your bottom line, you're going to find ways of releasing more money.
Okay.
You'll have more things come to you that you'll have to worry about, right? So spending money is a way to make us feel good, but if we don't have enough money, and we go ahead and spend that money, we're going to continually
get
worry
into that
about
cycle.
Exactly. So when we release the idea that money is our security, money is the thing that we need to work towards. When we get the idea that it's just a result, an effect from the causes that we create, that's when we can actually attract more money to us. We start getting into a state of flow where, if we become aware of who we are and we become aware of our purpose in life and we start following our purpose, that brings on a state of flow that allows us to attract more money towards us. It sounds a little far-fetched, but you stop worrying about money and you start living life. That's when things are a lot easier.
So, and in my thinking, Steve, as I grow in my perspective, or as I expand my perspective, talking about going from my classroom, talking to the greater community here in Brantford, we've talked about the fact that we're experiencing tremendous growth. There are a business class of people right here in our community who are sitting back saying, and they're doing the same thing over and over again and making ends meet and doing very well for themselves. And yet we're seeing a huge increase in investment in our community from outside the community that could actually be capitalized by people within our community should they be able to see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, so the way I see it is that our people within the community are wonderful people. They start a company to first off look after meeting their basic needs.
Yeah.
Then their company grows. They start, they obviously are giving service to their clients,
Yeah.
but they now are giving service to employees by offering them employment.
Yeah.
But what happens is that the business owners are more or less business operators. They use their business as a job, so a way of bringing in income. So instead of working the business, what I'd like to teach them is how to stand aside from working the business and being a business owner and looking at ways of growing that business. Well, I want to teach business owners how to become visionaries.
Okay, whereas, and I envision, or I see them, and I shouldn't use that word envision, but I see them as visionaries, at least initially, because they created this business,
That's
a lot of them, and then they somehow get into this cycle of, okay, again, like you said, making ends meet. I've got to do this to make the bottom line. I've got to generate cash flow because I've got employees depending on their weekly paycheck, and they just get into doing this thing over and over again because that's the way to keep feeding this machine that they've got going.
Exactly.
But they don't take the time to step outside and really see what other opportunities.
What potential, what opportunities, how they can serve more people, more clients, more employees, right?
Okay.
So I had the same sort of issue. I owned a business back in the 90s, and I was fixing forklifts in Toronto. My partner and I got together, we talked up a storm, we talked ourselves into a lather about how big our business was going to grow and how great it was going to be on the initial ideas of doing this. And when we started our business, he started doing what he was good at. I kept doing what I was good at. Over the course of 10 years, I trained myself to be really proficient at fixing forklifts. That's what I knew how to do. I could do it great. I could do circles around most mechanics in that industry. And I just kept doing it, kept working.
Yeah.
And there's a problem with just trading time for money, and that is that you reach saturation. There's only so much work you can do before you burn out.
Okay.
Right? And then once you hit that point of saturation, you hit a point of diminishing returns. So things like relationships start falling apart. And that's exactly what happened to me. 6 years into it, I couldn't take the hours anymore. I cut back my hours, which meant that our income was cut back. Which
added other stresses.
Added other stresses. We still had other employees that, my business partner said, there's no way that any of these guys could fill your position or bring your income in if we take you off the road and make you a manager. Right? And at that time, I was really disgruntled about it. I wasn't thinking, I wasn't aware. I was still in this very state of this is the way it's got to happen. And naturally, it fell apart. So after 6 years of running a business, I resigned. My marriage fell apart, and I just kept doing whatever came next, okay. Right?
So when you talk about, and you just used a phrase that really captured the essence of what I think we're talking about, and that's trading time for money. Mm-hmm. What you need people to do, much like the wealthy barber spoke about paying yourself first, if you give yourself a couple of hours of time each week where you're not trading it just for money, but you're actually looking forward and looking for opportunities or where the next growth opportunity could come from, it could pay much huge dividends than...
Huge dividends. So, I teach business owners to become visionaries. What do you want your business to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 100 years' time? What kind of a legacy do you want to leave for your kids, your community? What kind of an impact do you want to make on humanity with what you do? And I get them to envision what that is and write it down on paper, because when you write it down on paper, you're thinking on paper, right? Your thoughts are very liquid, mm-hmm. And the great thoughts that come and go cause you to flounder and just take whatever's coming on next. But when you start putting it on paper and making a plan to achieve that goal and taking action on that plan, that's when it happens.
It becomes more tangible.
It becomes more tangible.
Okay.
Every step that you take towards that goal is growth for not just yourself, but for your company and everyone in your sphere of influence.
Well, this information may be ringing very true to somebody sitting at home who may be a business owner or maybe working in a business and thinking about striking out on their own. How is True Results getting their word out to people right now? Are there programs that they can enroll in? What is?
Absolutely. So I do webinars. Tonight I'm doing a thing called Ask Steve between 7 and 8. People are welcome to join me on Facebook, type in a question, and I will do my very best to answer it for them. The other thing that I do is seminars, okay. Workshops. I do presentations at the public library. I'm looking for more public speaking opportunities to impart this wisdom, this knowledge, that's not mine. It belongs to my mentor, Bob Proctor, yeah. And help people grow.
But there is themselves. A track record of success behind this information as
sure.
well. I mean,
you know what? You take a look at Bob Proctor, right? Like my success is in following with what Bob is teaching me. His success was he was a grade 9 dropout with no business experience, yet he started a company that grew into a multinational company very quickly within about 4 or 5 years' time, earning $1 million. And this is back in the 60s and 70s. He was worked with companies like IBM, the Prudential, helping them to increase their bottom line substantially. Now, this is Bob Proctor's knowledge that I'm bringing to people. So if Bob can be as successful as he is, well, any one of us can be. And I'm trying to follow in my mentor's footsteps.
Wonderful.
So,
Well, we look
yeah.
forward to having you back, and hopefully you'll bring one of your success stories in with you.
You know what? That's a great idea. I'm going to do that.
All right, Steve.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe.
Back to the news.